When Apollo 12 launched into the vast darkness of space in November 1969, few could have imagined that its journey wouldn't end with just a successful moon landing. What started as a mission to collect lunar samples and test equipment became a 30-year mystery filled with strange signals, lost spacecraft, and unanswered questions that puzzled scientists for decades. This is not just the story of a moon mission, it's the untold story of how Apollo 12's legacy continued long after its astronauts returned home. The Apollo program is one of humanity's greatest achievements, a series of missions that defined an era of exploration, courage, and technological brilliance. Most people know about Apollo 11, the mission that made Neil Armstrong the first man to walk on the moon. But Apollo 12, the second mission to land there, remains one of the most fascinating and mysterious of them all. It was a mission of precision. It aimed to prove that NASA could land exactly where it wanted on the lunar surface, something Apollo 11 hadn't done. But what followed was a series of events that turned a simple lunar mission into one of NASA's strangest sagas. Apollo 12's story doesn't end in 1969. It extends decades into the future through space anomalies, lost equipment, and a piece of history that mysteriously returned to Earth's orbit 30 years later. So, let's uncover the forgotten 30-year journey of Apollo 12, where science, mystery, and history intertwine in ways even NASA didn't fully expect. The launch that almost failed. On November 14, 1969, Apollo 12 lifted off from Kennedy Space Center, just 4 months after Apollo 11's historic flight. The crew consisted of 3 men: Charles P. Conrad, Richard F. Garden, and Alan L. Bean. The skies were dark, heavy with clouds and rain, a far cry from the clear blue skies that greeted Apollo 11. Just 36 seconds after liftoff, disaster struck. A bolt of lightning hit the spacecraft, sending electrical surges through its systems. Within seconds, the command module's instruments went dark. Mission Control watched in horror as Apollo 12's telemetry data vanished. But thanks to Flight Controller John Aaron, who famously uttered the phrase, "Try SC to AUX," the crew switched the signal conditioning equipment to auxiliary power, and miraculously, the spacecraft came back to life. That single decision saved the mission from being aborted and allowed Apollo 12 to continue its historic journey to the moon. A precise landing on the ocean of storms. Unlike Apollo 11, which landed miles away from its target, Apollo 12's mission was all about accuracy. NASA wanted to prove it could land close to a pre-selected site. The target, the Surveyor 3 probe, a robotic spacecraft that had landed on the moon 2 years earlier. On November 19, 1969, Pete Conrad guided the lunar module Intrepid to a pinpoint landing, just 200 meters from Surveyor 3. It was a stunning display of navigation and control, proving that NASA could land astronauts anywhere it wanted on the moon. The astronauts spent over 30 hours on the lunar surface, collecting rocks, setting up scientific experiments, and even visiting the old Surveyor probe. They removed parts of it to bring back to Earth, including its camera, to see how lunar conditions had affected man-made materials over time. But unknown to them, one piece of their equipment would take on a life of its own, continuing Apollo 12's story long after they left the moon. A journey back to Earth in a new mystery. After completing their mission, the crew rejoined the command module Yankee Clipper and began the return trip home. But unlike Apollo 11, NASA decided to crash the lunar module Intrepid intentionally onto the moon's surface after the astronauts returned to orbit. Why? To test the seismic equipment they had left behind. When Intrepid impacted the lunar surface, the seismometers recorded the vibrations and scientists were astonished. The moon rang like a bell for nearly an hour. This strange observation sparked decades of speculation about the moon's composition. Was it hollow? Was it structured differently than Earth's crust? While scientists now understand the moon's vibrations as a result of its dry, fractured interior, the phrase, "the moon rang like a bell," became one of the most quoted mysteries of the Apollo era. But the strangest part of Apollo 12's journey wouldn't reveal itself until decades later. The lost spacecraft that returned 30 years later. When the mission ended, NASA assumed everything was accounted for. The lunar module was destroyed, the astronauts had returned safely, and the mission was logged as a success. But in September 2002, more than 30 years after Apollo 12, astronomers discovered an unusual object orbiting Earth. At first, they believed it was an asteroid, roughly 30 meters wide, traveling in a highly unusual path. They named it J002E3. However, its motion and brightness didn't match that of a natural rock. Something was off. Scientists ran spectral analyses and discovered that its surface reflected light in a way consistent with white titanium dioxide paint, the same paint used on Apollo rockets. NASA soon confirmed what many suspected. This wasn't an asteroid. It was the S-IVB, the third stage of Apollo 12's Saturn V rocket, the very booster that had launched the astronauts toward the moon in 1969. The mystery of the wandering rocket stage. So how did a piece of Apollo 12's rocket vanish for 30 years and suddenly reappear near Earth? The S-IVB stage was supposed to have been sent into a heliocentric orbit around the Sun after separating from the spacecraft, but something went wrong. Instead of escaping Earth's gravity completely, it entered a complex, unstable orbit around the Earth and Moon. For decades, it drifted unseen through space, occasionally pulled by the Moon's gravity, before finally returning near Earth in the early 2000s. After a few months, it was flung away again, disappearing back into the depths of space. To this day, no one knows exactly where it is. It could still be out there, silently circling the Sun, a forgotten relic of humanity's golden age of exploration. The forgotten experiments of Apollo 12. Beyond the drama of lightning strikes and lost rockets, Apollo 12 was also a mission packed with scientific breakthroughs. The crew installed the Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments Package ALSA, which included instruments to measure seismic activity, solar wind, and lunar magnetism. These experiments helped scientists understand that the moon experiences small moonquakes caused not by tectonic activity like Earth, but by tidal forces from our planet's gravity. Another experiment studied the moon's thin atmosphere, or exosphere, which is made up of trace amounts of helium, neon, and hydrogen. This data shaped our modern understanding of how airless bodies interact with solar radiation. Even more fascinating were the biological results from the Surveyor 3 probe that the astronauts brought home. When scientists examined its camera, they discovered something unexpected. Viable bacteria Streptococcus mitis that had supposedly survived 2 years on the lunar surface. Although later tests suggested the bacteria might have been contaminants from Earth, the discovery raised serious questions about how resilient life could be in extreme environments and whether microbial life might survive in space or on other planets. Apollo 12 Quiet Legacy. Apollo 12 never achieved the fame of Apollo 11 or the drama of Apollo 13, yet it remains one of the most scientifically successful missions of the Apollo program. It demonstrated NASA's ability to perform pinpoint landings, conduct complex surface experiments, and recover data that would inform future lunar missions. The astronauts' humor and camaraderie, especially Pete Conrad's lighthearted attitude, showed the world that humans could not only survive in space, but thrive in it. But the mission's 30-year mystery, its wandering rocket stage, the ringed moon, and the possible survival of bacteria gave Apollo 12 an almost mythical status among scientists and space enthusiasts. It stands as a reminder that exploration doesn't always end when the mission is over. Sometimes, the echoes of a journey continue for decades, waiting to be rediscovered. The story of Apollo 12 is more than just a tale of astronauts and rockets. It's a story about resilience, precision, and the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding. From surviving lightning strikes to landing beside an old robotic explorer, from making the moon ring like a bell to a rocket that returned after 3 decades, Apollo 12 proved that space exploration is full of surprises. Even after 30 years, the mission continues to teach us lessons about science, engineering, and the enduring spirit of curiosity that drives humanity to reach beyond the stars. And as we prepare for new lunar missions in the modern era like NASA's Artemis program, it's worth remembering the forgotten adventures that made it all possible. If you found this story fascinating and want to learn more about space's untold mysteries, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into the wonders of the universe. Because in space, every mission tells a story, and Apollo 12's story just might be the most mysterious of them all.